A glimpse into the lives of artists, authors, and influencers, discussing sincere moments, shareable stories, and unfiltered memories. Let's take a snapshot with Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Speaking about your writing process, you were very detailed in this book. Was that nervous for you? Like you're laying your heart out in the public.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was one of the things I felt very committed to from the very beginning was honesty and you know, great vulnerability and transparency. I think mainly because I felt like if I was going to ask anybody to spend the time, and I wrestled a lot with this, honestly. I had someone at the very beginning that I was discussing possibly kind of working with me in this process. I ended up working with a great author named Ken Abraham who helped me in the storytelling process. Just because if I sat down by myself with a computer screen or a pad of paper, you know, I didn't even know where to start. I'm like, okay, I've got, you know, this is going to take me 20 years to write this story. So I had almost like a coach to kind of go, okay, let's talk about this. Tell me about this. Take me into this story. And then he kind of helped in that process.
Why did you choose Ken Abraham?
Well, Ken's a good friend. I've known him for years. He and I started trying to write a book together about 20 years ago, way earlier in my journey. And it was too soon. And I knew that. We got into the process and said, I'm not ready to do this yet. Let's push pause. I didn't know it was going to be a 20-year pause. I think it was 25 years ago, maybe. And we raised kids kind of together. Our kids went to the same high school and middle school. So I would see him over the years and we'd be like, someday we're going to write that book. So when it came time, he was the guy that I knew I wanted to help me because he's a great writer and a friend. And I felt like it was somebody that I could trust, you know, in that process. He already knew me. But I was talking with someone else before Ken and I decided, just kind of discussing with different people. And this person asked me, now, why do you want to write a book? You know, it was a really kind of, at first I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't. Why would I ask someone to take the time, you know, to take this journey with me? And I think then I really began to realize that, you know, if I'm going to do that, I feel like I owe the readers a very honest telling of my story. I want, and again, like I was saying a moment ago, the places, you know, in Scripture even that are the most encouraging in my life and have been the most impactful is when there's real honesty about the lives of those who even were, you know, their missteps and their failures. Even the Apostle Paul talking about how he was weak, but it was actually in his weakness, you know, that Christ's strength is made perfect. And so, like, those are the verses and the places that give me so much hope. So I thought, if I'm going to tell my story, I can't just skim the surface and tell the good stuff or the victory stories or, hey, let me tell you about all the things that I've, you know, done well or done right. I feel like I need to be honest in that journey. My son Caleb, who's an amazing artist and songwriter, and he and his brother and their band Colony House.
Is it Will?
Will, yes. And Caleb sat with me. He's 26 years old. He's a great writer, a great songwriter. And he said, Dad, promise me one thing. If you're going to do this, he said, promise me you'll be really honest and you'll really let people know the real story. Because he said, you know, we don't need another book that just kind of says, hey, here's all the kind of good stuff and let me just, you know, cheer you on, cheer you up. But you got such a amazing story, you know, if you'll really share that. And so I think that was just, I knew from the beginning that honesty and vulnerability was going to really be important.
How did that affect you, though, when you started to write these things out? Because knowing your story is one thing, but then actually writing it out, doesn't it bring you back? Do you not journey through that process again?
Yeah, for sure. And I think in that, the part that I didn't necessarily know or prepare for was that there was a lot that I think I learned even about myself, deeper levels. I think I kind of knew it, but when you really dive in kind of deep, and my wife and I, through the years, and I talk about this in the book, when we've met with lots of counselors, marriage counselors, I mean, that's, been part of our journey with all of our brokenness and our stuff that we've tried to work through and have been working through. But so I learned a lot of things in that about myself, about my desire to try to fix all the broken things in the world and the things that I talk about. But I think retelling those stories and going back into, some of the hard places and the pain and the sadness, I would find myself, even talking about what it was like to grow up in my home when my parents would fight and fuss. And I found myself weeping as I was writing it because I was kind of back there, in that moment, 6, 7-year-old little boy, wondering if my dad's gonna, come back. He's driving away. He's mad and that sadness. And, I think, there was some really good things even for me in that process.
What did you discover about yourself? Did you discover anything about yourself deeper in?
I think, I think again, it was probably things that I knew, but I went a little even deeper into it. I think that whole thing of, I think I really did. I don't know that I realized when I started the journey of writing about my journey, writing my story, how much I would realize that being a fixer, trying to fix what's broken, that it was actually, as I began to write all the places where I have experienced God in the most profound ways, those have all been in the most broken places and the most unfixable places. So there's this frustration within me, like, I got to fix this, whether it's going into prison, with Chuck Colson's ministry and going in the death row cell blocks where there are just some really broken stories that aren't going to be fixed this side of heaven. And yet I experience the grace of God and forgiveness and freedom in the hearts of these men who are, behind bars the rest of their lives, having destroyed their lives and others' lives, and yet finding hope and freedom. Or I go to the jungles of Ecuador where, missionaries were killed trying to take the gospel to this, savage tribe at the time. And I experience, the gospel in a way I've never experienced it before. Or going into orphanages, in China and adopting our daughters, and these broken places where some of this is not going to get fixed until heaven. And yet God is there in this amazing way. And so I think that was something I really discovered about myself, that's where God's shown up in my life, have been in those broken places.
It's so good. And that's what I got too in reading, after the accident, your insight of heaven, your great insight of God and his existence came through, not really scripture. It didn't really come through one of your songs that you wrote, but it came through that experience.
Right.
And I found that was powerful because we can all experience God. We may not all, have access to the Bible. We may not all have a pastor, but we have an experience where, not to say that these things are lesser than, for sure not.
Right.
But I realized in reading your book that you provided such a great insight on grief and loss. And that only came through the experience with Maria Sue.
Yeah.
Can I read something for you?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, actually, before I read it, the part that really struck me was the brotherly relationship, the love between Caleb and Will, when Will just seemed just running, and then Caleb ran after him and wrestled him to the ground, sobbing, just totally sobbing. How did that make you feel when you saw that? Yeah,
well, I mean, the relationship between those guys is really remarkable. It's been amazing to watch. It alone is a picture of something that only God could do in the hearts of a brother. One of the things, I'm not even sure, I think I mentioned it in the book, but I'm not sure if I did or not. But even when the accident happened and Will was the one driving the car, Caleb came to us and and said, this is always pretty hard, pretty emotional, but he said, Dad, do you think is there a way they could just say one of her brothers? So they don't know, was it Will or was it me? So Will doesn't have to carry that burden by himself. And, that's just the heart of this, of Caleb, just an amazing brother. At Maria's memorial, Caleb stood and just said, we all prayed that God would heal Maria, and we believe he did, but we don't like the way he healed her. We don't like this side of that. We don't understand. We don't like it. But he said, we're praying that God's going to heal the heart of my brother, and I believe we're going to really like and love the way that he heals my brother Will. And so, just an amazing heart.
So are you.
In Will.
I saw you there. You were holding him right there as he was talking, like a fatherly figure support. That in itself is beautiful. That comes from God.
Yeah.
Only can come from God.
Yeah. Absolutely.